I grew up in a broken, pretty non-religious home. I did have some exposure to the Christian church throughout my childhood. It was relatively limited, and I had a lot of exposure. I would say just the perfect amount of exposure to the depravity of mankind. And that made it so that the few times that I went to church and I heard about this Christian God, I felt sane. Because everything that I felt was evil and wrong in the dark world that I saw around me was confirmed. It was affirmed there at the Christian church. So that sort of led me to always be attracted to the God of the Bible, but I had no foundation. I had no really anything. So when high school came along and people start saying, well, the Bible, this, the Bible, that, you can't trust it, I just was like, oh, okay. I had no foundation, right? But I believed in this creator God, and the way that I sort of reasoned, why all these bad things happen is just that's how the world works and that's how people work. And this creator God doesn't really do much of anything, and that's okay because that's just how the world works and that's how people work. So I put my hope in and my resilience for life, I suppose, into just different aspects, whether it was athletic, academic, whatever, that was sort of what kept me living and breathing and going in such a dark environment. And little by little over the years, all of that was stripped away, one by one, everything that I put my hope or my identity into. So that got to a point where for much of my life, I told myself, I just have to see enough tomorrows and then life will be different. But then everything had been completely and totally stripped away from me, and I had no will to live. That I got to a point where the hope of tomorrow was not a hope of someday this will get better and it won't be so bad. It was drilled into me that tomorrow will only bring more pain. So I went from being depressed and not wanting to live to genuinely desperately wanting to die. And that was when, as a depressed young woman, I cried out to this God with no expectations, but he did indeed intervene. And he told my mind that there is a time for everything. He used the Bible to tell me there is a time for everything. And in that, he whispered to my soul that he will show me the way to be able to laugh again, to be able to dance again, that there will come a time in this unfelt tomorrow where life can exist once again. And it was just enough for me to hold on. So that 6 months later or so, I find myself facing the prospect of marriage. And it's the most terrifying thing that I can imagine, because life had taught me that if there's one thing that I can guarantee, anything good is not worth it. It'll be taken. And the pain that it will bring is not worth having the good thing. And all I wanted was just to be content, not to be happy and married, but could I just coast and be content? And the Lord once again used the Bible to speak to me very clearly. I couldn't deny it. And the promise that he gave my soul, wasn't totally conscious at that time, but the promise that he gave my soul, the words of life that he whispered, were that he would show me the way to be alive, even if and when my worst fears come to reality. He never promised me that everything that I was afraid of wouldn't happen. He never promised me that I wouldn't taste that soul-crushing defeat once again, or that tragic loss. He never promised me any of that. All he promised me was that I am here. I will hold you together. Be mine. And I knew. From that moment, I knew there was no turning back. I had nothing else, and I didn't want anything else. So I said, okay, that's it. I'm yours. And I found that to be true ever since. Any amount of pain, any amount of loss, any fear come true, the Lord is the way to life. He does sustain.